Live from a bunker in the heart of the Ozarks, a podcast that's a magic carpet for pop culture to enter your bloodstream and go to your brain. It's Sif Pop. Welcome to Sif Pop Weekly, streaming live most Saturday mornings or available to download later in your podcast feed. Unless, of course, you're a patron.
Patrons get perks.
Patrons get those perks.
Woo!
I'm your host, Aaron Dicer, and I get 10% of the podcast, and that's him being generous. It's Andrew Ormsby, ladies and gentlemen.
If that were true.
Each week we'll chat about movies, TV, and whatever else from the pop culture universe is on our minds. And please welcome our guest this week. He wasn't gone. He was just lost. It's Jonathan Paula, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, hello. Good to be back.
John.
I missed January and the Sifties and stuff, but I'm excited to talk about a couple of movies today that I have some thoughts on. Let me tell you.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you brought thoughts along with you. That makes it a fun show when we have thoughts.
That's weird. I just wing it.
Well, those are yeah. So your thoughts are more procured in the moment. You don't bring them in a bag with you to the table. You're just.
I didn't say mine were prepared. I just have them.
Well, if you already have them, then you're not picking them off the tree during the show. I don't know. Listen, I'm just trying to make this metaphor work, guys. That's what you do. You just try to make
decide
the
whether
work.
I like a movie or not based on your guys' reaction to the movie.
It's not until I sit down here that I'm like, did I like this or not? I'll start talking and figure it out by the time I finish my sentence.
Right. The secret is out. The secret is out. We are going to chat Uncharted and Kimi today. Those are the two movies today. Excited to get into those. Best ever challenge today is best ever movies that have a word in the title that begins with the letters UN. And then, of course, we'll do some buried treasure, all that kind of fun stuff. Before we get into our reviews, though, wanted to give you a heads up. The Sposkers are available for your choices. So every year we do the live Sposkers in conjunction with the Oscars, the Academy Awards. And how this works is you go to the website, sifpop.com, where you see the Sposkers menu. Just click on Sposkers. That'll take you to the pick sheet. And then you just put your picks in. Keep track of your own because they won't be available to see until, I think, the day of the Oscars, once you've picked them. I think you can choose to get an email with your picks sent to you. But anyways, go to sifpop.com, click on Sposkers, make your picks. We usually have hundreds of people that do this every year, and it's a lot of fun because then on Oscars night, we all watch the show together. We do the live show on the YouTube channel, and we see who does the best picking. We kind of have a competition between our experts, quote unquote, the guest gurus on Sif Pop, and Andrew and I, and then an overall competition as well. So it's a lot of fun, and it usually comes down to how long the broadcast is going to last because that's the tiebreaker, and it's always fun to see somebody rooting for.
Always over.
It's not always over. It is not always over. Sometimes they actually have been under. I
don't believe you. I don't. When in my lifetime have the Oscars come in under 3 hours?
It's happened. Somebody look it up and prove me right.
Oscars number one.
I've actually been so frequently flabbergasted by how long they run that I'm like, is it programmed to 3.5, and that's why they go 3:35? Is it only no? It really is a half an hour and 5 minutes long. Some years.
Yeah. No, it's been over
35.
4 hours sometimes. Sometimes they go over an hour.
I don't know how you program a show that poorly. I used to AD in high school, in college, and AD shows and run time on a live TV program. If you're over 30 seconds, you've completely failed at your job. You got to hit those commercial breaks, and you got to hit your 45 minutes, whatever. To go over an hour beyond scheduled, it's like, how do you program it like that bad?
Well, you just don't care at that point. Like there's some level of we're going to show what we want to show and just not care about the length.
No. If we're going to run late, well, let's just make the best of it. Let's throw in an extra in memoriam while we're at it. Like, why not?
Yes, might as well. But it is what makes that tiebreaker interesting, and I think what makes it work really well is because you've got so few categories. There are going to be ties. But then it always comes down to, at the end of the live show, somebody rooting for the broadcast to end and somebody rooting for it to go on. And it's kind of one of those fun things. So anyway, Sposkers are available to pick. The show itself, I believe, is the 27th this year of March.
Pretty late in the season.
Yeah, so you've got like 5 or 6 weeks to get those picks in. But go ahead and do it as soon as you're ready.
And if you're like me, you have 5 more weeks to binge all of those short documentaries and live action shorts and all that stuff you don't normally see. You got to go out of your way to find. Hopefully your local theater does, like a marathon.
And rumor has it, this may just be a rumor. Rumor has it the people involved in the Sposkers may be the only ones watching the Academy Awards this year.
I still enjoy it, but the public sentiment does seem to be fading.
Oh man,
I didn't buy that tuxedo for nothing.
It is going to, I think it is going to be tragic how few people watch the awards this year. It is going to be even worse than last year, in my opinion. But we'll see. I'm
inclined to agree, especially if something like Power of the Dog sweeps. It's not a movie I think many regular people saw. And I know the people that did see it have some divisive opinions on it. So, like, who knows if...
Yeah.
The year we had Parasite, I feel like that was great. Everyone was like, yes, that was good. And
well, here's one interesting thing that I don't know that it changes anything, because the Academy is clearly, and welcome to topic number 1 before we get to the reviews. The Academy is clearly saying we don't care about commercial success as much as we care about honoring what we think is art, right? Like, I mean, this is a huge body of people, so it's hard to say they're saying anything as a group. But they seem to be wanting to, putting Drive My Car as a Best Picture nominee is a clear sign, in not putting Spider-Man or whatever, they might put in there. Dune's probably the closest, I guess, to popcorn entertainment. But even
there's always one movie every year that's kind of teetering on the edge of popcorn entertainment, as you said, that they'll nominate, but has no shot to ever win.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but this
used to be the case. That didn't used to be the case. Titanic won, Avatar won. Did Avatar win? I don't remember.
No,
but
Return of the King did, and I believe that was the number 1 film that year.
Right. Avatar was nominated, though, I believe. But anyways,
it was.
Yeah. So it is one of those interesting things, and the other part of that is now more than ever, those things are available. Power of the Dog is on Netflix. You mentioned not a lot of people have seen it, but I wonder if Netflix will release numbers that'll be like, hey, because people know it's available and it got all these nominations, the numbers completely spiked. The only thing that
Netflix revealing numbers, that's funny.
Well, they do when it benefits them. The only movie of the 10 that is nominated that won't be available to stream digitally by the awards is Licorice Pizza, unless they announce something, or to own. Like West Side Story and Nightmare Alley just announced they will have discs out by the Oscars, like the week
Nightmare
before.
Alley's already on Hulu. So
I was going to say Nightmare is already on digital.
Right.
But yeah, the big one I'm waiting for is West Side Story. I did not get a chance to see that theatrically, so I'm waiting for the home
so I
release.
think that home release is like a week or two before the Oscars.
Yeah.
So
and
that's
it's going to completely bust every prediction I have, I'm sure, because I'm going to have to restructure my ranking. I hope I love it. I think I will.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the show. We've talked about the Academy Awards enough, but yes, go to SiftPop, SIFTPOP.com, and then click on Sposkers, and that'll take you to the pick sheet. And thanks for doing that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's kick it off with a review of Uncharted. A young street-smart Nathan Drake and his wisecracking partner Victor Sully Sullivan embark on a dangerous pursuit of the greatest treasure never found, while also tracking clues that may lead to Nathan's long-lost brother. This is Tom Holland as Nathan Drake, Mark Wahlberg as Victor Sullivan, and then you've got Antonio Banderas in there as well. What did you guys think? Did you like this, love it, hate it, or it was just okay?
I liked it.
You know what? Jonathan just like straight in the liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. I
All
liked
right.
it.
Andrew?
I liked it.
I think I'm with John. Maybe a little bit lower, but still liked it.
So maybe low side of liked it, medium low side of liked it.
Yeah.
I'm in the just okay camp, and maybe not even high side of just okay. I have a lot of problems with this movie, but there isn't. It's not like terrible. It's not one of those movies I came out of going, rolling my eyes the entire time. But it is one of those movies where I definitely, if I was going to really enjoy the experience, was going to have to view it a certain way. I was going to have to quit thinking, certain things about it. So, John, it sounds like you liked it the most. So why don't you kick us off? What's some of the stuff you loved about Uncharted?
I don't like taking that mantle because I think we all kind of disliked it the most. But actually, before we begin proper, I would love to hear your thoughts on the game franchise and perhaps more importantly your background with it. I've played all five.
That's a great point. Yeah,
I've played all five PlayStation titles. Some of my absolute favorite. Uncharted 2 is one of probably my top 5 games ever. It is just phenomenal. Yeah. And even the most recent one, Uncharted Lost Legacy, that stars the 2 female protagonists. That game was excellent. They've all been so good. And since they came out, 15 years ago, it feels like playing a movie. They play very cinematically. It's an action adventure, Indiana Jones as a game. And I think it was from the jump obvious that this would make for a really good movie someday. And we finally got that movie, and it's like, what did they get wrong? Why did something that should so easily translate to the big screen fall so short?
Well, I think this is where they fall short. They tried so hard not to be Indiana Jones that they forgot to try and be Uncharted in some elements of it.
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting thought. I will answer the question as well. No experience. Never played a single second of any of the games. So that puts me in a different kind of mindset, I think, than you guys, because you are probably in many ways noticing. I will say this: there's a little bit of Warcrafting going on here, and when I say that, this is my primary example of a movie where every once in a while there's a wink, and I'm like, why are you making a wink so obvious that people who haven't played the thing will get? And there are a couple moments in this movie where I'm like, okay, I get you're winking, but I have no clue what you're winking at. Thanks, guy on the beach.
I'll just say
I don't know what's going on.
That was Nolan North. He is Nathan Drake in the games.
Okay, fine. That's what I'm saying. But that is to me, like, my difference in perspective is, and maybe why I liked it less than you guys, is I'm not connecting to any of that stuff, and the movie is making it obvious enough that the people who aren't connected to it are going to feel left out, are going to feel like I'm missing something here.
It's interesting to hear that you liked it the least with no connection or relationship, because I was going to assume you liked it more, because from my standpoint, the thing that really deterred my immersion and my enjoyment was the casting. Like Tom Holland, for all that he is able to bring to the table, he's not Nolan North. He's not Nathan Fillion. He's not Nate Drake. He is a 20-whatever cosplaying as a mid-30s something. And he doesn't really even feel like he comes into the role until like the very final couple scenes. When he finally picks up a gun like 3 minutes before the movie ends, I was like, finally, he put the gun down. Like, that's when you start the first game, like the second thing you do after learning the controls is shoot someone. And yet there were no guns in this movie. It was really weird. Like, they tried to redefine the character in a way that I didn't care for. And then, Mark Wahlberg is also, I think, badly miscast. This is supposed to be like an old, crusty, cigar smoking, mustache wearing, Hawaiian shirt wearing dude. And Wahlberg is like, say hello to your mother for me. Like, it doesn't jive at all for me. Like, the characters we know and love from the other 5 games, or 4 in most cases, because they weren't in the 5th, with what we saw on screen. And it's like, they have been so clearly defined. There isn't a lot of room for adaptation. It's not like you're taking a platform or something like Sonic, where like maybe his character isn't as developed because he doesn't have strong human characteristics in a lot of his games, versus Nate Drake, who is a very well-defined, very well-written, and well-acted character in cinematic stories that are 10, 12 hours in length. So we know him really well. And then we get this version of him, which just feels so different and so unfamiliar. And I think if you can divorce yourself from the game, which I tried to do as best as I could, I think on its face, it's like a decent actioner in the vein of National Treasure or Tomb Raider or Indiana Jones. And I think it has a lot of fun and huge set pieces. But yeah, that character work, none of it worked for me, like, at all.
Yeah.
That is interesting, because you would assume that I would like it better because of that. In the part that you're talking about, I do like that. I think Tom Holland's fine in this character. Like, I liked this character.
I should stipulate that he's good, but he's not good as Nate, if that makes sense. Like, it's a good movie, but not a good Uncharted movie.
But
he is your Nathan Drake now.
He is my Nathan Drake. That's all I know of Nathan Drake. So he is a good Nathan Drake for me. I like this character. I find it interesting. It clearly has somewhere to go. I didn't know that guns were a big part of it, so that never entered my mind. Mark Wahlberg
kills so many people.
Mark Wahlberg didn't seem terrible to me any more than just the normal Wahlberginess of his performances. But yeah, so you're right that my disconnection from the games helped me to enjoy those parts of the movie, or at least give them a little bit of a pass.
So what didn't you like then? Because this is actually throwing my assumption on its head. I'm actually curious.
I think this movie is, I guess I'll just go into my name. I think this movie is so dumb and illogical to the point of ridiculousness. There are choices that characters make in this movie that often make no sense, and it just happens over and over again. And then there are moments that just stretch my ability to suspend my disbelief in ways that
the entire
it's just hard for me. It's just hard for me.
Like, come on.
It's terrible. It's terrible. Like, if you get distracted early by how terrible the logic of this movie is in some of the character choices are, it is all you will see for the entire movie. And that's what I said. I had to shift my brain to go, okay, take in the pretty visuals, take in the charismatic performances, have fun with what they're trying to do. Remember, this is based on a video game. Let it use video game logic if it wants to. Like, there's these things that I had to keep reminding myself, because yes, overall, I just felt like it was one of those things that didn't make a lot of sense. So that's why, and usually when a movie is like that to this degree, like for instance Moonfall that I've seen recently, I come out of it really hating it because I just can't get past the eye-rolly nature of it. So I think it does say something about the craft of the film that is good. I have a couple other negatives, but that's probably the primary one since you asked that question.
And Andrew, what about you?
Well, I think because you and I have played the games, maybe our suspension of disbelief when it comes to those crazy set pieces is fine and sometimes enjoyable. Like, the beginning of this movie with the plane is the beginning of the third game, right? Or is it?
Yeah, I enjoyed that sequence, I think, the most. Everything with the cargo plane, I enjoyed a lot, because it did feel like I was maybe not playing the game, but it felt like, all right, I know this is familiar, and it's completely unbelievable, but also I think within the realm of possible enough that I was able to kind of shut my brain off. But yeah, the last part of the movie, I don't know if we want to spoil it. It is in the trailer. It's just so completely ridiculous.
The Flying Dutchman.
It's just none of this is possible. You're insane.
Yeah.
So my question is this: what percentage of movies that are released now do you think start in media res, that start with the middle and then find our way back? Like, this is starting to really annoy me.
I know you're talking about the cold open, where they show you a snippet from the third act, and then they jump back and tell you the story. It's very lazy screenwriting.
Except it's done in the game, so it's kind of like homage. Like, this is how they did it in the game.
I understand, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm sick of it. Like, I'm just like, okay, like a moratorium on this for a while. Like, let's stop doing this for a while.
It's very lazy screenwriting, because it says to me that you couldn't come up with a stronger way to start your movie.
Yes.
So you're just cribbing your own excitement later in the movie and trading against it. So, like, and then it's the whole time we're like, when are we going to get back to this? And it's just frustrating. Like, come up with a better way to start your movie. Indiana Jones used to do it great. You would start the movie in a cave looking for a gold fertility idol, and that would be incredible. It'd be an opening 10 minutes that you do not see again later. You don't go back to the jungle. Like that's what made those movies really good. Is they started with that like Saturday morning, conclusion from like the last serial or the last adventure. And Uncharted totally could have done something similar where Nate finishes up like his last whatever. But in this movie, he's sort of not a treasure hunter yet. We start early. This entire story.
He's a pickpocket.
For those uninitiated. This entire story is a prequel to the first game, if it even exists in the same continuity, and I don't think it does. But the Nate we know from the video games comes after everything we see in this movie. This is kind of how he got his start.
By the way, the pickpocketing is some of the most frustratingly annoying parts of this movie. Apparently, if you're just in the same room as somebody, you don't have to be next to them, but you can pickpocket them. You know?
It's not even sleight of hand magic. It's just straight actual magic. This movie's just like, nope, things just disappear and reappear somewhere else. There's so much of that in this movie. That's what I'm saying.
Teleportation.
It's teleportation. Basically,
there is some teleportation later during the Flying Dutchman sequence where Marky Mark is like, "Hey, I'm going to go up to the helicopter," and then they cut and he's there. This, you got to climb a 50-foot chain in 50-mile-an-hour winds across this rickety contraption.
And it's how heavy was what he was carrying?
Yeah, exactly. There's at least hundreds of pounds on his back, and he's like, "Dum dum, I'm up."
Yeah.
I haven't done that since gym class, but it was hard then.
Yeah.
To climb a rope straight up.
I wonder if action movies today like doff their cap to the Fast and Furious franchise and just like, thanks for making things so ridiculous that we can get away with anything. There
was definitely a few sequences in this that I could 100% see in a Fast and Furious game, a movie. If you replace those boats with like tractor trailers or something, that's a Fast and Furious sequence. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. People jumping from truck to truck in midair. That's absolutely fasten your seatbelts right there.
Well, go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say, I want to compare this movie to another video game treasure hunting movie that recently, quote unquote, just came out. Tomb Raider.
Yeah, the one with Alicia Vikander.
Yeah, I like Tomb Raider leagues more than I like this one.
Me too.
Big time.
Me too.
Big time.
Yeah, because Tomb Raider, for what it is somewhat grounded in reality. And I don't mean physics, which definitely play a part, but the characters seem human. Like whenever Lara finally has to kill somebody, it's horrifying. Like it's not like she just does it like carelessly, like you see like Nathan or Sully do it. They play it for laughs in this movie. He's like, "Oops, sorry, I killed you." Yeah.
Yeah, no. I think Tomb Raider has done it better. And here's the other part. My other major negative, actually. Two
list them all, please. Dragon
major negatives, but the next one I want to talk about is you mentioned, Andrew, that this movie is trying hard not to be Indiana Jones, and yet
it felt like it,
and yet it's just Indiana Jones. Like just because you reference it doesn't mean I'm not looking at you and going, you're doing the same thing, right? Like. This movie is not only derivative in those ways, it's derivative in the way it handles its characters. It's derivative in the, there's just so much trope and cliche. And I understand storytelling cliches exist for a reason, right? I mean, Pixar has a storytelling rule book, right? Like they have a law book of what makes a really good story. And you can see that pattern in their movies. But seeing the underlying pattern is different to me than just feeling like, oh, I've been here before. Oh, I'm not. What's new here? What is new in this movie, right? Like, what is it giving to me that I'm like, oh, I haven't seen a story do that before. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the difference between paying homage and just straight up copying then?
Right. Yeah.
That is a good question, and I don't think this movie really adequately answered it.
Well, but here's the thing. Uncharted, the video game, was fresh because it was like, oh, we're going to make an Indiana Jones video game. Like, that's, I guess Tomb Raider, I don't know which one came out first, but...
The sort of, the separation that the games created and its sort of selling point was, it was the modernization of the action serial. It took Indiana Jones and brought it to the 21st century.
Yeah.
And it introduced more modern aspects. And perhaps most importantly, it anchored everything with a really, really strong emotional character throughout the whole thing.
So maybe how like Jason Bourne is to James Bond, right? Like
yes,
that
I
was
think
the
it's a
idea.
great analogy. And I don't know that they adequately tapped into that modernization aspect, and they certainly did not tap into any relationship aspect. One of the strongest parts of Uncharted is Nate's relationship with his future wife, who's not even in this movie.
Yeah. I was surprised.
I was just like, where's Elena? How did you not include like one of the central characters of this franchise in the movie?
I would almost give them props for some of that. You mentioned the gun thing, the wife thing. It seems like they're maybe thinking big picture. They're thinking franchise. They're thinking,
potentially, I will like the second movie a lot more because it's going to finally kind of go into the territory I'm more familiar with and the stuff I want to see translated to the big screen. And early box office returns indicate that this movie is actually going to do really well. I was surprised.
It's Tom Holland. Like it's.
I think my theater was almost entirely empty. There was only like 2 other people there, but. Maybe
Mine was pretty full. But I will say I find it interesting. I really do think it's a Tom Holland thing. And I think we thought we were past the idea of box office draws as actors, and I don't know that we are. Like, I still think there are some charismatic performers that like put butts in seats, and I think he will be one for the future.
I never thought we were past that.
I've heard a lot of talk about the era of the movie star being in the past, in that now
I've heard that as well, and I'm inclined to disagree that it's entirely gone. Like, you used to be able to put like Julia Roberts on the poster, and that was enough.
Yeah.
George Clooney, go watch it. Like when Ocean's 11 came out 20 years ago, or whatever, just the cast poster alone was like, oh shoot, this is going to be huge. These days, I think you need more of a hook, and I think this had both. It had any PlayStation fan has played this at some point, and then anyone who likes Tom Holland, and that Venn diagram includes a lot of people.
Yeah. The other negative I want to mention, it is a huge one for me, but not a huge part of the movie. I thought the score in this movie was terrible.
I noticed it.
Again, so disappointing because the score for the video games is so good. I have all 3 soundtracks from the 3 main games, and they're brilliant. The theme is so good, and we hear like little motifs of it, I think twice, and it's sort of like a really low key, like piano only version of like the famous Nate's theme, whatever it's called. And otherwise, the whole time I'm like, where's the theme music? It would be like rebooting Indiana Jones and not including John Williams. It's like, what are you doing? I just thought it was harder for no reason.
I just thought it was shoddy work too. Like it felt intrusive. It wasn't used well. None of the melodies felt like they fit the scenes to me. It almost sounded cheap, like it was made for a video game. Like I don't know why it caught me early, and I could not shake it the rest of the movie. Just how terrible the score felt to me. But
I want to talk about a positive. Can we talk about a positive?
We did like it, and I think I might even go so far as to say I'd recommend it. But what did you like about it?
I think the movie's funny. I do think the movie's funny. There's a recurring bit with a Scottish guy that I chuckled at every single time. It works. And whenever you have Tom Holland doing that version of Nathan Drake, I think that's where it works the most. Because Nathan Drake is kind of not, I don't want to take away from his skill, but he fumbles into a success a little bit every now and then. And that's part of his charm. So whenever they were doing that, I was like, okay, this is the part of, or he's just, kind of a Ryan Reynolds-ish, not to like that extreme, but he has that charm of that positive, smarmy attitude. And whenever he's doing that, I'm like, okay, I can dig this. Now, wait another 5 years to do Uncharted 2 whenever Tom Holland can actually grow facial hair. And I want to see, Uncharted 2 then.
It was on the topic of his age, and we mentioned this a bit in the members-only pre-show. It was disconcerting a bit because I had just watched Cherry, where he plays a 17-year-old. And then this movie where I think he's trying to play 30. I don't really know what age he's trying to be. but he filmed them in the same year. They both shot like last year, and it's just like, so are you trying to be a teenager? Or are you trying to be 30? Because you can't have it both ways, Tom.
Yeah,
and you
in
definitely look
Spider-Man,
more
he's 18-ish.
Yeah, and in Spider-Man, which I think that obviously his most known role, Peter Parker's like college age. He's going off to school. He's 18, 19 years old.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those things when they did the backstory for the Nathan Drake character. I was like, Tom Holland could have played, 12-year-old Tom Holland if he wanted, wanted to.
It was so weird because like 15 years earlier. Wait, so he's an infant? Like, how old is this kid?
Yeah,
he looks like he's only 5 years younger. Like, I do not. They went from 25 to 10 because the kid looked 15 or 16. I don't.
Yeah. He has Paul Rudd syndrome.
A bit.
Yes, a little bit. Not a bad syndrome to have.
No.
I do want to single out some of the, not to spoil them, but to mention some of the character betrayals and like the double agent stuff and all that backstabbing. I think that's par for the course in an adventure film. Again, going back to Raiders, Alfred Molina stabs Indy in the back within like the first 3 minutes of the film. So that's expected. But Aaron, for you especially, having not been familiar with this franchise, were there any surprises? Did you think throughout the movie, oh, this Sully guy is totally someone I can't trust?
No, I didn't. Sully, it seemed to me the movie was trying to say that Sully and Nathan were the core, that they were going to be, and that everybody else was out for themselves. And I didn't find any of the betrayals to be a twist.
Yes. Oh, that was the point I was getting to. Is like, for me, I know that Sully is like Nate's surrogate father, and he is like the coolest guy, and we know we can trust him. So when they keep trying to play him off as this untrustworthy guy going to stab Nate in the back, I'm like, I never believe that. I'm never going to believe that you're going to twist the one other teammate as a villain, whereas I know everyone else in this movie is a villain. So there was no tension there, and they kept trying to mine it. Like, oh, look what I did. I'm like, the exact thing I expected you to? That's not it's not dramatic. So that happened, I think, like 3 or 4 times where they would be like, oh, I got you. It's like, no, you didn't. We expected you to.
And we're back to the negatives. The other positive that I did want to mention, I think this movie is beautiful often.
I think it was shot really well.
The visuals are well done. I think there's a real competence to the visual aspect of this film. There are things I've never seen on the screen before, probably for reasons because they're that ridiculous, but also they did look beautiful. And that's where I was able to kind of land, both with the humor that you mentioned, Andrew, as well as the visuals, and just go, okay, here's how I can enjoy sitting through this movie and being invested in it in that way. Because I wasn't invested in the gold. I wasn't invested in, what they were trying to do. I was barely invested in the characters because, honestly, without being too spoilery, one of the main driving forces they set up has basically zero payoff. And I think there's another. I think it's another thing they're saving. I mean, it clearly is if you stay through the credits. Another thing that they're saving.
Post-credit scenes.
The couple post-credit scenes.
Well, I guess technically there's only one post-credit scene because technically the credits hadn't started for that one.
Really? There's like a pre-credit scene and then a mid-credit scene.
Yeah.
Because they flash the title card. There's a quick like epilogue.
Oh, okay.
And then the credits proper.
That's what I'm saying. Technically, the credits hadn't started.
I guess I considered the title as the end, and then, but no, you're right. No credits had actually run, so I guess epilogue would be probably better. It's interesting because I often go back and watch trailers. Was I mistaken in thinking there are scenes in the trailer from the epilogue of this movie?
I think so.
There are.
What are we doing? What are we doing? I don't understand. Like, it's wild.
One last thing I want to talk about, because I already mentioned post-credit scenes and stuff. The video game element of this movie, and I'll just say the Flying Dutchman sequence in this movie. Yes, it kind of doesn't work for, the film, because it's so ridiculous. But if that was a level in a game, that would be amazing.
That's the brain. That's what I talk about when I'm talking about having to put myself in that mindset of this is a video game movie. So video game logic.
Yeah.
How cool is this? Like, yeah. And maybe that's why it's so hard to adapt video games sometimes, because they it's hard to produce a movie that feels more realistic, and we're less willing to suspend disbelief when we're not playing. So, yeah. Well, there you go. John, did you have anything else you wanted to mention?
I think generally we've been really negative, but I did have a good time with this. It was a fun, diverting 2-hour picture. I think all the leads are having a good time. The chemistry, I think, mostly works, even if it doesn't feel like the Nate and Sully we know from the games. They have a rapport. And I think some of the puzzle solving and some of like the adventure and exploration stuff kind of works when they're in Barcelona. I like that sequence quite a bit. But yeah, if you can suspend your disbelief and get past the fact that this is not a great adaptation of the video game property and just look at it as a standalone cinematic movie, I think it's pretty fun. And I think most people will have a really good time with it, not expecting much. And if this had gone straight to Netflix, not that they could afford it because this is clearly like a $200 million film, I think you would absolutely be like, oh yeah, I'd watch that on streaming. This is really fun.
Has Netflix not dropped 200 million on a film?
I mean,
I feel like they have.
Maybe
they
have.
How much was Bandersnatch? That movie had to be expensive to make.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, that being said, this is the type of movie that is nice to see on a big screen.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a big screen experience, but
yeah.
I don't know that it's worth the big screen ticket price, I guess was my point.
Well, there you go. That is Uncharted, a mild recommend, I think, would be the overall feel on this. You both had a little more fun with it than I did. I had to find the fun. The fun was not gone. It was just lost. I had to find it in there somewhere.
Andrew, what did you think of the Nolan North cameo?
I was glad. I mean,
does that make us simpletons? That I was like, oh, that's
no. Honestly, no. That's just cheese for us to nibble. Like,
I laughed before he even said a line because I just know what Nolan looks like, and I'm like, ooh. And then like a half a minute later, the rest of the crowd got it, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm.
I was the only one in my theater who got it. I was the only one. And I had
Aaron doesn't have any connection to the franchise, and yet you were clearly like, "Oh, this is definitely something."
Oh no, it was like the movie was so obvious. Like, why are we stopping to talk to a random guy? Like, it was so clear. And actually, I assumed it was probably an actor that played the character at some point because he even says some sort of line like,
"He's like, oh yeah, that happened to me once."
Yeah. So yes, exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. That is Uncharted. It is available in theaters. Let's move on to our second review, which is Kimi. During the COVID-19 pandemic in Seattle, an agoraphobic tech worker discovers evidence of a violent crime while reviewing a data stream and is met with resistance and bureaucracy when she tries reporting it to her company. This is HBOMax, stars Zoe Kravitz. This is Steven Soderbergh's latest streaming effort. He has kind of like found his zone in the streaming world and is just throwing movies out every year, a couple a year. It feels like. You've also got Rita Wilson popping up in here.
Very briefly.
Derek Delgadio from In and of Itself.
I was so surprised. I'm like, is that Derek? I didn't know he was even an actor.
He wasn't before this. This is his very first acting role.
Well, there you go.
I have to believe Soderbergh was like watched In and of Itself, whether he went to the show or saw it later and was just like, I like that guy. Let's, get him in this.
Aaron, you were the one who turned me on to In and of Itself, Derek's sort of real life magician cinematic show, whatever you want to call it. And it's brilliant. One of the most profoundly interesting and provocative movies I watched all of last year. And he had a small role in this picture, and it was nice to see him.
It was nice to see him. Erica Christensen in here as well. Devin Rattray, who, by the way, if you recognize
Buzz McAllister.
Buzz McAllister popping up here. So yes, what did we think about Kimi? Did we like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay? Andrew, you get to go first this time.
Oh, I did not like this movie.
Did not like it. Did
not like this movie.
John, what about you?
I liked it. High side, I liked it.
I am going to say low side of loved it. I really enjoyed this movie. I think Soderbergh is on a run right now. And I am loving the stage of his career. He's just like, for me, telling great stories. Like, I just love that he just finds these stories that he wants to tell and scripts he wants to make, and then just makes movies. And I really, really enjoyed this one. Jonathan, what were some of the things that you liked about it?
The detail work was really effective. I think early on they set a very realistic space.
Yes.
And little things like just seeing Zoe Kravitz's like workspace and how it's a little cluttered, it's a little messy. And like the way that I'm just being a tech guy, I am so appreciative when movies don't just gloss over. They're like, look, I'm in. I've hacked the system. Like, no, you didn't. You didn't do anything. You barely opened a window. Like, you have to. And I like that this movie didn't play down, and it actually showed some things, and it slowed down the pacing to be like, no, she needs to log into this console. She needs to copy a file from this to her drive to use it on her laptop because she's trying to separate work from personal. Like, oh, okay, that they visualized it and they slowed it down, and that's actually what you would want to do. And some guy mentions like using an incognito browser so you're not tracked. I'm like, yeah, yes, thank you. Like that's a real thing that people know about, but movies are just so, I think, blasé usually about like the tech side of things and just individual moments.
I need to hack into the mainframe.
Yeah, I also really appreciated that this movie takes place during the pandemic, but isn't really about the pandemic. It was just like, yeah, no, this is reality. And I think it's weird that Hollywood has completely pretended like it hasn't existed for 2 years, because it does. And it doesn't have to be part of the story, but it can be a backdrop for the story. And I think they leveraged it really well here without really making the movie a pandemic movie. It was just, in this movie, people wear masks when they go outside. And that's kind of it. Like, that was kind of the extent to which it needed to feed into the narrative. And I appreciated that. It felt very much like this is a real person in a real place having real things happen to her. And the progression of movement that kind of raises the drama throughout the first act felt very organic and extremely well paced. And then it was like that last 30 minutes where it started to lose me. But I loved the first half.
John, I just have to say, you mentioned the exact two things that stuck out to me, and it's great to have you on the show, so I don't have to talk so much. But the verisimilitude of the technology in this is just astonishing. Like, as a sound person who has worked in sound editing and those kind of things, I will be the person who, when they play a sound file and they put something on the computer, I'm like, that's not a WAV file. And if that is a WAV file, it's not the WAV file for what they're listening to. Like, I can see that. I can see what a WAV file is supposed to sound like.
It's such an easy thing to get right. It's such an easy thing. And I remember saying to my wife, like, in any other movie, they would be like, can you clean up this audio? Sure. Click, click.
Click,
I
click.
removed.
Yes.
I isolated the vocals. Like, that's not how that works. You need to bring it into a preamp. You need to EQ out the low end and the high end.
She had to get like her.
She had to get the giant soundboard.
Yes.
Yeah, I really appreciated that they went through the work of showing like, no, this is actually how you isolate vocal frequencies from like a really muddled recording. Mm-hmm. And you would not get this super clean, isolated vocal. You would get something that like sounded like a bad phone call recorded through like a cardboard tube. And I love that. That was realistic.
All that stuff was handled so well. And then the other part, I think you mentioned the pandemic. This was my first experience with pandemic based entertainment where I was like, that's how you do it. That is how it's just a part of our world. And, you know, when at one point in the movie, she mentioned something about, you know, COVID's been really hard on me or whatever. I was like, you said the C word, like, because movies will like tiptoe around it, you know, like, and it's just like, no, this is how people talk. Like, it's just, I really felt like this movie took place in those things in the real world. So yes. In addition to that, I think the technology, the digital assistant technology, which I have all over my home, was also really well visualized. It's one that doesn't exist. You know, Kimi is the technology, which I think has to be that way. But you can absolutely see this being, you know, a real tech company, tech thing. So yeah, I really like that stuff about it.
I appreciate it. I think the first or second line of the film quickly just name drops Amazon and Google and Siri to let you know, like, Kimi is our version of that. Now let's move on. Yeah. Whereas I think in lesser movies, they would try to set up this backstory. Like, Kimi is this autonomous voice activated digital. Just say Siri, we'll get it. Just say the word Siri and we'll make that connection in our head and we can move past it. Because for the rest of the movie, I'm just going to pretend this is Alexa and it's the same exact. But obviously,
Mhm.
you can't use Amazon's device by name, but you can mention it, and you can kind of it's quick screenwriting shorthand to get us where we need to be to understand how powerful is this company. Like, oh, okay, they're Amazon powerful. I get it now.
Yeah. Yeah, or going to be Amazon
Yeah,
because they're
right.
getting ready for their IPO, right? Like that is kind of one of the
Yeah.
primary drivers of the movie.
I think
I,
they're going public and stuff. So
yeah, I think the logging of the context issues was really smart too, to show us like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 of those, you know, kind of what she does at her job, and those all felt very real to me as somebody who has these devices, you know, like it's
Yeah.
I really loved a lot of that stuff. So I think the primary thing that this movie had going for it, and I think it's something Soderbergh's really great at, is it just put me in a world I was just into and believed and was ready to, you know, now tell me the story of this person and what's going.
And I think that
you know,
goes a
to
long
happen
way.
to
If you
them.
can set up a really realistic environment for your characters in the first act, we're more likely to believe what happens to them in the second and third acts.
Yeah.
And that movie did this really well.
Yeah. Yep. Andrew, we haven't heard much from you. I know you didn't like this movie.
Nope.
So feel free to talk about whatever. You don't have to talk about good stuff, but yeah,
Oh,
tell us
I
some
want to
thoughts.
mention 2 things that I did like. Well, one thing I kind of have mixed feelings on, but one thing I definitely did like is the way that Soderbergh shot this movie,
Mhm.
because I think he was very smart the way he shot this movie. Whenever they're in Kimmy's apartment, everything is on steady cams or it's on still frames, you know.
Mhm.
But whenever things are getting uncomfortable for her, everything is Dutch angles or handheld, and it's not shaky to where you can't understand what's going on, but like it's a, you know, like somebody's running alongside her, and you know, you get the kind of 1990 late 90s cop show, you know, like
Mhm.
running with the police and stuff like that. It kind of felt like that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can dig this, because it's a different way of trying to visualize what this person's going through, and that I guess that's a good way to lead into one of my mixed things that I kind of like, but I wish they could have done better about this movie. And it's one of the tropes that I wish Hollywood would really focus on fixing, and that's having a character whose sole identifying characteristic is their mental illness.
Mhm.
You know, like, as somebody with a mental illness, I hope that people realize that there's more to me than just that.
Right.
And they do that with is it Agatha? Is that her name? Or
Angela.
Abigail? Angela, thank you. They do that with Angela. She's tech savvy, you know, she's
Mhm.
smart, tech savvy. I think that they could have worked with that a little bit more, to where I think it was like 80% mental illness, 20% tech savvy. And I'm like, you could throw in a couple other things, and they're like, maybe she's a great cook. I don't know. You know, just give me something
Well,
to where,
I think she seems to be an above average carpenter, for whatever that's worth.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, she definitely knows how to use a nail gun. Uh, but that's going to lead into the thing I hate the most about this movie.
Which was
The villains, the criminals in this movie are so stupid that it's mind-boggling. These thief criminal guys make Harry and Marv look like Anton Chigurh. It's crazy how
I agree with that.
incompetent and inadequate they are.
There was some sequences, especially at the end.
Yes.
I don't want to spoil too much, but at one point she shuts off the lights to like get a jump on the
She's
bad guys.
talking for like 30 seconds and nobody's doing anything.
And it just seems so unbelievable that like you're next to an open window with a lot of like light pollution and street light, and shutting off the light is just going to make it dimmer, but you can totally still see everyone in the room.
Yeah.
And it's like, how slow are they? Have guns pointed and they're like, oh, look, the lights went out. And, oh, is that a stool? Oh, that's my face getting smacked. It just, it seemed a little, for a very smart and realistic movie, they lost a bit of that credibility at the end when the criminals, they were like yakety saxing around.
Well, I'll tell you, I thought the movie was okay till that
Zoe
point.
Kravitz is probably like 90 pounds soaking wet, and these 3 grown men like had trouble subduing her, and I was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was okay with the movie. Like, it's okay, you know, but the last like 10, 15 minutes of this movie, I hated. Like, I was actually angry with the movie, with how they were wrapping everything up. So that's why I don't like the movie. Up until that point, it was okay. there's another trope in movies like this, and I think this might have been the point, but like characters who are so painstakingly obvious that they're not good people. I'm trying to, because I don't want to spoil who's good and who's bad, but like people are like, I guess I could go and call them. Winky winky, let me go.
I don't think that's a spoiler. It's not even, they don't even hide it. And it was frustrating to me
that's what I hate about it. Like, come on, like
it was frustrating to me that Angela put herself in a situation in the middle of the movie that exposed herself like physically and legally. And I'm like, she has been so smart and so buttoned up this whole time. And then she's like, I'm just going to go sit down with someone who was clearly the big bad and be like, will you help me? It's like, no, they're not going to help you. They are definitely not going to help you. What are you doing?
Man, I bought all of that.
Really?
I'm with you on the action stuff. Well, I'm with you in understanding how you feel about that stuff, like the stuff at the end. I totally gave myself to it, but I was aware. Oh, we're doing a movie thing now. Now we're in a movie land. But the stuff like the taking it, that is something that felt real to me because I think we are naive. I think maybe that's just me. I know I'm naive, so I would absolutely go to someone and just be like, hey, like, what do we do about this? And it's like,
just dumpty-dum. So this is my only copy. Here you go. Like, it seemed to me that would be very believable for most characters, but they've already set up Angela as someone who was cautious, someone who was asking friends for like, what's the best way to handle this and sort of minimize my exposure. And she was already taking those steps to protect herself. So when she kind of stepped out onto this ledge, metaphorically, I was like, how does she not sniff this out? Like, she knows that she's in trouble right now, right? And she eventually catches onto that. But for a while there, I'm like, she must know this is a bad idea. How does she not? And I think that just ran counter to the character they had established in the first act as being very cautious and very
I don't know that I 100% agree, but I think I see what you're saying. For sure in that. As far as the ending goes, I actually had more of a problem with the epilogue part of the ending than I did with the actual final, fight scene or whatever you want to call it. It's just something.
How you cure agoraphobia.
Yeah, right. Like trauma, more trauma is how you get cured. Like what is this? I don't understand. I think this movie, by the way, had a perfect ending. If they would have cut at a certain point, there is I'll just say a doorway conversation that would have made the perfect ending to this movie, in my opinion, because it was hilarious. It was funny. It was like everything had really been resolved that needed to be resolved. Even the thing they think they're resolving
how do we know what's going to happen to who?
Well, but even that stuff, like, what do we need the epilogue for that scene isn't saying? You know what I mean? Like,
I know what you're saying.
I do wonder. I always wonder this when I think of
if there was executive notes.
If somebody was like, "Hey," but I don't know who does that at at Warner. Like, I don't know if somebody at Warner is like telling Steven Soderbergh that he needs to add an epilogue to his movie. So I
feel like he might get some leniency at this point. I mean, this guy's been kicking around for 20,
that's what I'm saying.
He should be able to kind of end his movies how he wants.
So then I'm trying to think, okay, is he making a commentary on this? Like, is he doing this for a reason? Like, the movie, this is not spoilery. It's just it's technical, but the movie ends on like an old school sitcom freeze frame. Like, what is that? What is he saying with that? Like,
they might as well do the jumping high five freeze frame,
right? So is that purposeful? Is he trying to make a commentary by that? Like, so in my opinion, I think the movie had a great ending moment that it could have used instead of going into that epilogue. But yes, I understand the ridiculousness of that last scene. I also still enjoyed it. There was something cathartic about it. I think it's that kind of like Run Lola Run kind of feel that this movie has, where it's like, there's this pursuit, intention, and then you're just ready for the tables to get turned. And I was ready for those tables to get turned. And so I kind of gave myself to it.
I enjoyed the plotting here. It felt early a bit like Rear Window meets The Call or 911.
Well, it's Blowout, right? It's
a bit of Blowout for sure.
It's absolutely Blowout in many ways.
And then the second half was like Run Lola Run meets Enemy of the State. Like
Yeah.
I'm outrunning the machine, and they can track me anywhere.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and I like all those movies. And this was like an interesting kind of mix of like, we're kind of cribbing from this picture, and we kind of borrowing some ideas over here. And the agoraphobia meets this like pursued person. Like, yeah, it was. I really liked that this movie was something I hadn't seen before.
Yeah. 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 Even though it was like pieces
Familiar.
of lots of things you've seen before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Any further conversation?
Not that I can think of, really. No.
Yeah, I think we touched
I'll
on
forget
everything I
about this
wanted
movie
to.
by the time we finish this podcast. And Aaron, this isn't a fair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Do it.
You
We're
are
not
a
about fairness
massive
here.
Soderbergh fan. Do you think
Yes.
that your fanboyishness has anything to do at all
sure.
with your love of this movie?
Of course. Of
And
course.
that's okay. We'll allow it.
And honestly, I've only recently come into my fanboy stage with him. Like, I've loved certainly many of his movies, but I think when I did during the pandemic, I really kind of filled in my gaps on his filmography, and that's when I was just like, oh, so he's a genius. Oh, okay, I get it now. Like, and his productivity and his ability to just keep cranking these things out is just, it's so impressive to me. And I'm trying to think of somebody like that who's just like, I'm just going to use the technology in front of me and I'm just going to make movies. I just want to make movies. And that's kind of who he's been really since Sex, Lies, and Videotape, is just like, I just want to use, visuals to tell stories. And he hasn't really gotten caught up in the Hollywood machine in the same way, even after Oceans. Like, it wasn't like he became, he hasn't directed a Marvel movie or a Star Wars movie, or like
I would like to.
He quit the biz, right? Like, he was like, I'm done. And then he made the Nick TV show, which was incredible. And then he decided, you know what? I'm coming back because technology has made this simpler and smoother. And I can just crank stuff out over, I can make a movie in 3 months. It's like, go for it, man.
Did he have any, I don't want to say, I'll just say gimmick, but I don't want you to come across negatively.
Sure.
Like in Unsane, where he did the whole thing on an iPhone. Did he have any quote unquote gimmicky things with this movie, or did he just?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I'm not certain, but I want to say he shot most of it with natural lighting. It did look like a lot of this was, and that would kind of go with his style. I know the last time I saw a Soderbergh movie, I think it was for this podcast, we reviewed Let Them All Talk, that cruise ship movie with Diane Wiest and Meryl Streep. And I think that was the same way. They shot the whole thing on like really basic gear, all natural lighting, like minimal setups, minimal takes. And I got the sense from Kimi that they shot a lot of this in just a couple locations. And if they shot this entire movie in 3 weeks or less, I would not have been surprised.
I will say I definitely agree with the negative point of the lighting not making sense at the end. I didn't understand what the movie was trying to tell me. I loved the turn, by the way. I loved the click moment where it was like, and I won't give it away, but there's it plays into both the themes and the technological structure of the movie, and also made a lot of sense to me. But then from that point on, there were some commands where I was just like, I don't think that's really doing much for you. You're just talking now. But yeah. Anyhow.
Yeah, the movie introduces a character who we mentioned. Like, he has no significance on the movie at all, like through 90%, and then he comes in at the very end and does nothing. So his service to the movie is zero. Like, is he there for referential purposes? Like, he was this other franchise that had to do.
His name is Kevin.
I was going to say they did name him Kevin.
Yeah,
and that last sequence definitely felt a bit like Home Alone.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, is that a winky sort of a thing?
Maybe Steve is like a huge Chris Columbus fan. He was like, you know what?
Everybody's a huge Chris Columbus fan.
We don't have enough Home Alone movies. Sweet Home Alone didn't do too well, so I'm gonna get my own little spin on it. Yeah. Let's add this in. We only got another week of shooting, guys. What if we just write this as we go?
So for me, I honestly thought that character was a commentary on the like everyman nature of Community, and just like, the idea of during, difficult times, people show up, that kind of stuff. You're right. He didn't he didn't do much.
I think that's a very favorable outlook. I saw Devin Ratray's character more as the Hollywood's insistence on painting like the creepy perv as like the wannabe hero.
Mhm.
Like he lusted after Zoe Kravitz from across the way his whole life or his whole pandemic, and then he wants to go and charge it, and he does not. And I get the sense
he
that
kind of does, but it just doesn't go away.
Yeah, it felt a bit like that like neckbeard redemption arc that we've seen in other movies, and it's just like he can just be a creep. We don't have to make him a hero too. And he doesn't even have to be a hero.
I never saw him as a creep. I don't think the movie was trying to paint him as a creep. I think the movie. Okay, just because he had binoculars.
I don't know. Maybe
it's a pandemic. What are you doing?
It's because he was a peeping Tom. He was a creep. Is that
was
what you're
Jimmy
saying?
Stewart a creep in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
fair
yes,
enough.
I think so. I think yes.
Jimmy Stewart was 100% a creep.
All right, I've disproved myself as often happens.
I think creep carries some negative connotations to it. I mean, voyeur might be a bit of a more accurate term. He was watching. I don't know if he had illicit intentions, but he looked like he did, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he was like on the web trying to find out who she was, and he's like, it wasn't that hard.
Yeah, there was that line that like he's already done a deep dive personal record search on her identity. So it's like, all right, you're watching her with binoculars, you're Googling her name, looking up stuff about her, you know what apartment she lives in. Like, all right, maybe you're doing a little.
I don't
bit
know.
Too much
I guess
work.
I took some cues from the movie. I can't believe we're spending a lot of time on this, but I took some cues from the movie. Number one, he's not in shadows. He knows that everybody can see that he's leaning out his window. Like he's not trying to hide that he's just looking around his neighborhood and seeing what's going on. Number two, I don't think Zoe's reaction. I don't think Angela's reaction to him paints that situation as like she's uncomfortable. I don't think we never get like the at least unless I'm forgetting something that the Angela character is like, oh, I can't believe that guy's got his binoculars on me again. Like, it just didn't feel like that to me that the movie was saying that.
I think she was worried. She had other things she was worried about in the moment.
Yeah, that's true.
Enough about that.
All right.
It's the most important part of the entire movie. It's the culmination of everything.
That's right. All right, let's get into the best ever challenge. But before we do, just a reminder: if you want to support what goes on here, you can do that as being a member of SiftPop. If you want to be a SiftPop member, you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/SiftPop. As John mentioned earlier in the show, we did a members-only pre-show about Tom Holland's career outside of the MCU. So if you want to hear any of that conversation or many of the other bonus podcast conversations, you can do that by being a member at a certain level, as well as your own personal ad-free podcast feed. You just pop that into whatever podcast player you use. You will get all the episodes, all the bonus episodes, no ads, and it'll come straight to you in the same place you usually listen to your podcasts. If you're interested, just go to patreon.com/siftpop, and thank you for even considering it. We really appreciate that. All right, let's move into the best ever challenge. We're going to do best ever movies that have a word in the title that starts with UN. We'll go number 5 to number 1. I'll kick us off with my number 5, which might get trumped. I don't know. This is where I have The Untouchables.
Me too.
At number 5. Oh, nice. We'll talk about it a little bit, Andrew.
It's my favorite Brian De Palma movie. I'll just say that.
Ooh, that's saying a lot, actually. Because he has quite a few. Really good.
I just love the way it goes back and forth between, and then there's a great shot of your. I know this is breaking the fourth wall here, but I just love Phil's attempt to bring up the picture, but he brought up his screensaver. The thing I love about The Untouchables is, you get this connection like almost immediately between Sean Connery and Kevin. And it's crazy how good these two guys are together.
That's Academy Award winner Sean Connery. Thank you.
That is true. Sir Sean Connery as well. Academy Award winner Sir Sean Connery. Yeah, he was only nominated once for an Academy Award, and it was for this, and he won, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
It's the only nomination he ever got.
I got to rewatch this. I watched it a decade ago. I gave it a 7 out of 10. It would have just missed my list tonight or this morning. And I remember really liking it, but not my top 5.
Also, I think De Niro is great as Capone. he just swings for the fences, and that is a reference. Yeah, I love this movie. It's great.
Yeah,
Aaron?
I agree with you. De Palma is interesting because he's another one that I've done some pandemic filling in the gaps. I mentioned Blowout.
I was going to say, yeah, you just mentioned Blowout.
Was one I just recently saw, and that's
So
why it was
good.
fresh
Love
in my
that film.
fresh in my mind, and it is really good. And this is really good as well. I mean, you look at the cast, you look at the performances. Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with the Untouchables. All right, so John, what's your number 5?
One I just caught up on very recently is I want to say the 6th or 7th entry in the Universal Soldier franchise, the final one, Universal Soldier: Day of Reckoning. So this technically isn't it's not an universal, it's universal,
UN.
but
That's fine. It works.
It starts with UN. This was a straight-to-video picture that brought back Dolph Lundgren and Jean-Claude Van Damme from the original, but they don't really have a lot of screen time in this one. It's actually about a new character. I want to say his name is
Universal Soldier.
I want to say his name is Steve Adkins. He's a stunt double turned actor.
Scott Adkins?
Scott, that's it. That's Scott Adkins. And
I've talked to Scott Adkins actually.
He's a cool guy recently. He seems like a great guy. Yeah. And this movie is a very hard rated R direct-to-video action spectacle, and some of the best stunt work, some of the best fight choreography, and some of like the most brutal and visceral fights I think I've ever seen in an action film. And if you want like a really hardcore, like bloody action film that like does not pull punches metaphorically and literally, this was a surprise. Like 30 years into this Universal Soldier franchise, which I don't even think was very good to begin with, this is the best movie in the entire franchise by a country mile. And I was like, it had no right to be. Every other movie is like very not good. And this one's like, holy crap. They like accidentally perhaps hit upon like a really strong, powerful film that I feel is up there with like John Wick in terms of like the gun fu stuff of like the last 10 years or so. Is like one of the better like hand-to-hand action related comedy action films.
Nice. Yeah, Scott Adkins, I interviewed him because he had a movie out last year called One Shot, which I highly encourage you to look up.
It's a good movie, actually.
Because it is a one-shot action movie.
That's great.
Or presented as a one-shot action movie, yes. Yeah. So, yeah, you can check that out. All right, on to our number 4s. Speaking of Steven Soderbergh, Unsane. I have at number 4. And I think I'm kind of in the minority on really, really liking this movie.
I don't think I've even heard of this one.
It's the one he shot on an iPhone.
Yeah, this was the first one I think he shot on. I think he's done a couple only on phones. But yes, and it is hard to separate sometimes the idea of watching it and going, oh, you're only getting that shot with a phone. You know what I mean? Like there are those moments in this movie where it's like you can tell he wanted to take full advantage of the ability to be in corners or, you know, that kind of stuff that he can do with a phone. And that part is interesting, but the movie itself is also really captivating. I'm telling you, the man just tells great stories. And if you want to check this one out, I would highly encourage it. It was definitely one that I
definitely have to catch up on my Soderbergh filmography. I've seen 13 or 14 of his movies now. And there's definitely a few big gaps. Aaron Brockovich, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, like those are near the top of my list of shame at this point. So
yeah.
I'll add Unsane to that list right behind the other 5,000 movies on my watch list.
Well, when you're dealing with somebody as prolific as Soderbergh, like that's a list for sure. What is your number 4, Andrew?
Oh, it's your number 1, so we can go ahead and skip it. So.
You don't know. Is there air? You don't know.
There is air in this movie. There's an airplane. There's.
Right. Well, we'll see. We'll see where it ends on my list. Okay. But yes, I know which movie you're talking about. What about you, Jonathan?
I don't know what movie he's talking about, so I'm looking.
United 93 has been trumped.
Okay. All right. My 4th pick is Union Pacific, which is a great like romance actioner, almost pseudo documentary about the transcontinental railroad construction back in the 1800s.
Interesting.
Let me look it up real quick. Union Pacific came out in 1939, I think. I probably would have included that in my email, I think. 1939. So it is a talkie. They did have audio back then.
Right.
This is one of those great like Western epics with like just 12 or 13 different characters and all these like parallel stories. One guy's the railroader, one guy's like the outlaw, the other guy is trying to catch the outlaw. Then there's like all the different women that kind of feed into this that like come along for the ride. They live in these outposts that move across the country as the railroad gets further and further west. They keep moving these little shanty towns as they work on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like a really interesting like slice of life drama in the Old West that meets like this really captivating story about how we built the first transcontinental railroad and like all the obstacles therein.
Mm-hmm.
I like a good old fashioned black and white Western every now and then. This is one of the best I saw last year when I went through a Western kick for a bit. So,
Nice.
yeah,
what was the title
Pacific.
again? Union
Pacific.
Union Pacific. Nice.
Yeah, big recommend. Really like that one.
Actually, for as much as I love Westerns and stuff, the old, like the 1930, 40 Westerns are
They can be tough to get into.
Yeah, like the Tom Mix, era, like anything that's predating like the 50s or the 60s. That's really what my genre of Westerns and, of course, modern Westerns. So
would it help if I mentioned this was done by Cecil B. DeMille, who you may or may not have heard of?
Oh.
Sekel Bedemmel. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll add Sekel Bedemmel to my list of people I should look out for. Actually, I had no idea. Yeah, I'll definitely add that. That's interesting.
All right. On to our number threes. My number 3 is Andrew's number 1, so we'll just go ahead and.
You don't know.
I might know what this one is. I might know what that one is.
No, I don't know.
Is it a Western?
It is. My number 3 is Unforgiven. We'll assume that is trumped.
Yeah.
Andrew, what is your number 3?
I got a documentary actually from a number
nice.
3. Yeah, Undefeated. It is my favorite documentary. This came out in 2016, 15, somewhere around there. It's about a high school football team. It's like an hour and 40 minutes. You will cry for an hour and 40 minutes over a high school football team. It's all about this. Actually, it's in Nashville, like in one of these very
the inner city of Memphis.
Oh, Memphis. That's what it was. Memphis, yeah. And it's heartbreaking to see this. The movie starts with the coach walking into the players' room, and he goes, "Okay, this player stabbed another student, suspended for the year. Okay, this student suspended for the year, shot another student. This student arrested for kidnap or for thievery, like stealing from a grocery store." That would be enough for a coach's entire career. That was my Tuesday. And that's how the movie starts. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, okay, so we're really going to get into it. But to see the impact that this guy tries to make on these players' lives. And this team had never once in the entire history of the school made it to the playoffs. Never once. And it's his last year. And he's like, I want to leave these kids with something. I want to leave them not with just a, going to the playoffs and something they can hang their hat on. I want them to be better men than when I came here. And it's one of the most emotional movies I've ever seen. And the fact that it's a documentary, it's just so well done. It won best documentary that year. I forget what year it came out. I should have looked it up. When?
2011.
2011. Yeah, 2011. It won best documentary. Oh man, you're gonna cry.
I put it on my watch list. That one looks pretty solid. It reminds me of Remember the Titans a bit.
Very much.
Some of the way you described it. Yeah.
You're going to cry way more.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's real good.
Undefeated is the name of the documentary if you want to check that out. All right, John, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is a picture that probably could have also been a buried treasure this week because I don't know that a lot of people have checked it out. It's an Iranian film from 2016 called Under the Shadow. And it's about a mother and her child trying to escape the bombing of her sort of Iran-Iraq war home. And it reminded me of, and it starts off as like a really compelling sort of intimate foreign drama where we're into these people's lives. We see how they live. And the Oscars loves those types of movies where we just see like the plight of like the working class in other countries. And then the bombs start falling and they have to do this. But then the movie shifts into a horror movie akin to the Babadook, and it gets really, really
What?
unnerving. Yeah, and it gets really scary and really frightening. And there's some like creature work and some like stuff with shadows and entities, and it is frightening. It is one of the scariest movies. Certainly one of the scariest foreign movies I've seen in a long time. And I guess
Wow.
Babadook counts as foreign because that was Australia.
Australian, but yeah,
Yeah,
non-English, non-English.
if you liked the Babadook, if you like a good horror movie, there's a chance you haven't seen this because it is from, I want to say, from Iran. I think it came from.
It's on Netflix. It says.
Yeah, Under the Shadow, 2016. Big recommend on that one as well. And it's different. It felt like I haven't seen something like this before.
You know, at the beginning of your description of this movie, that is not the turn that I thought it was going to take.
I know. It's not quite a spoiler. I feel like they kind of layer that in early on, but I'm like, oh, this is like this is kind of a depressing story. Like, I wonder if she's gonna be able to save her kid and like make her way out of the country and evacuate. And it's like, oh no, it's not that type of story at all. They're being haunted.
Whoa.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's pretty good.
Well, I added it. So yeah.
All right. Number twos. You might be surprised, Andrew, to hear this is where I have United 93 in at my number 2. So, oh, okay,
Really?
fair enough.
That's awesome.
Andrew, what is your number 2?
Well, it's your number 1. So
It's the only one left that I could have at number 1.
yeah, exactly.
We'll say it. Say it.
Damn it. It's a miracle. Unbreakable.
All right, trump that. John, what is your number 2?
I feel like we just did this. Unstoppable. Tony Scott's Runaway Train thriller.
Yes.
Denzel and Chris Pine. I haven't watched it since it came out, but I remember loving this in the theaters.
It's really fun.
It is like a good old fashioned adventure movie, and it's so simple. Like, the train is out of control, they have to stop it. That's it. That's the whole story. And these two, like, Hollywood icons, they nail it with aplomb. It's such a fun.
Better than what I thought it was going to be.
It really is. It could have been really simple and really bad, but they milk such a simple premise for like a solid 90 minutes worth of tension. And if you like speed, if you like runaway action, where there's not a bad guy here, right? It's the people versus a problem. There is no antagonist. There is no corrupt train yard foreman who's like trying to prevent them. Like, no, everyone wants the train to stop, and it's just, let's work the problem for 90 minutes.
That sounds like a great Dennis Hopper role.
Yeah.
The train conductor or the train foreman.
The corrupt. Or in the movie Money Train, convicted murderer Robert Blake plays the antagonist in that. He just wants to stop what's his name? Wesley Snipes and the other one.
What was the other train movie that had Denzel Washington, but it had John Travolta in it? And it was horrible?
The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, the remake of the Landau film from the 70s.
That was not a good train movie.
It was all right.
Unstoppable is a lot of fun. It is one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite movies. I recently heard him. That's great. Break it down for like an hour and a half on a podcast.
I got to check that out. I want to rewatch it. It's been 10 plus years since I've seen it, but it is a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I thought when it came out, that was it.
And I think more importantly, Tony Scott, God bless him, and rest in peace. He could shoot the heck out of an action film. He knew how to do like those like tight whiz pan like telephoto close-ups to really accentuate like the speed and the movement. And he had like a certain sheen and gloss to his action films that we don't have a lot of these days. Like, he had a really good look to his films.
Yeah. All right, on to our number ones, and they are all known at this point. If you've been paying attention.
Gosh. No spoilers.
Yes. Mine will start with Unbreakable is my number 1 UN movie.
I swear I thought you had 93 higher than Unbreakable. That's fascinating.
It's possible. I've said this before. I'll say it again right now. I don't check my best ever list to see. I in the moment think, which one of these movies I I want to put in more right now, or do I think is my favorite, or whatever. So
Well, with that logic, I don't think United 93 would be on anybody's list. Nobody wants to watch that movie. It's
no, but
horrifying.
how your brain balances those things, right? So
Oh,
like
yeah.
I ask myself in the moment, like, which of these is my better movie, my more favorite movie, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mentioned it's the Schindler's List effect. Obviously, one of the greatest films ever made, full stop. But how often you're like, hey guys, let's get some popcorn and pizza and come over to my place. We'll watch Schindler's List tonight. No, it's not a thing that happens. That's not a movie you want to rewatch. What do you like about Unbreakable so much?
There's a difference between important movies that it's an important movie everybody should watch.
Yes,
I am first and foremost. I am an M. Night fanboy and apologist, and so there is that part of it as well.
And also, this is like his second picture. This is when he was still batting 1,000.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I just remember the first time I watched this movie, just being in awe of his shot choices, some of the things he was doing with mirrors and themes, and broken mirrors. It's just there's a lot going on visually here beyond the incredible plot and dialogue. So
his color palettes that he chooses for each movie too. The
And
purples in this one.
It is impossible to communicate now how crazy it was that this was a comic book movie when this came out, because the comic book movie, it's not like it didn't exist, but it was not what you think of it today. And
this came out right before Spider-Man 1. And I think that for me, at least in my head canon, is sort of the demarcation of like modern superhero movies versus like the Tim Burtons and the Chris Reeves.
I would go X-Men, but
that's fair
it's
too.
hard. It's hard for me to think, and maybe it exists. I'm sure it exists. But this feels to me like the first, at least, major movie that was like, you can take comic book idea and put it in a serious universe. You can take the idea of these costumed, people and make it make sense for a real world environment. This was because before this you've got the Batman films that are really comic booky and rubber suits and over the top. You know what I mean?
Chris Reeves, Superman.
Yeah, and this was just
being
like
not a lot else. Those were like the two big franchises, and we got, I think, some adaptations of Fantastic Four and Captain America that like went straight to video. That I think everyone who has seen them knows they're terrible.
Yeah, I just looked it up. This came out a couple months before the first X-Men movie.
Yeah, they came out in 2000.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really love Unbreakable, and for all those reasons, and just I just think some incredible tension. It's clear how much he loved taking things that Hitchcock did and making them his own. So yeah, I was a huge fan.
And real quick, how do you feel about the two follow-ups, Split and
Love Split, hate Glass.
I don't hate Glass.
I hate Glass.
I think those movies are just out of time. It just feels like Split to me was fine. I really enjoy McAvoy's performance in Split, and Glass for that matter, but it's less of what Glass is about. And of course the end, we've talked many times on this podcast about my reaction to the end of Split. So yeah, it is the most memorable, impactful movie-going experience I've ever had. Split. The
ending of Split,
the
Bruce Willis cameo.
Yeah,
I remember flipping out, and everyone else is like, "Why is that important?" And I'm like, "You don't get the implications." I was so excited, and I'm not even a big M. Night fan like you are. And I was
as an M. Night fan, he's talked ever since Unbreakable.
I really want to do a
sees this as a trilogy. This is a trilogy. I know there are more movies to this. It's just I don't know when that's ever going to happen. So the fact that he had planted those seeds and then delivered a surprise, the fact that he kept that a surprise, even though that movie, by the way, had been shown before it released publicly, like the fact that those people kept it quiet. It's hard to deliver a movie experience like that. Because
I feel like the age of like the great surprise cameo is kind of dead because everybody ruins everything now.
Yeah.
Twitter has ruined the
But-
third
but-
act twist.
But it's almost like I want to fight against the idea of calling it a surprise cameo because it's so much more than that. Like he created a surprise sequel, like a sequel you don't know is a sequel to the last 5 seconds of the movie. Like that's just genius level storytelling twist type stuff. Like I don't know how you do that, and he did it. He pulled it off, and that alone for me was that movie. So yes, I have a really soft spot in my heart for Split. I understand why everybody hates Glass. It makes complete sense to me why people would hate Glass.
It would be the equivalent of going to watch a horror movie in theaters now, and at the very end you see Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, it's a Cabin in the Woods prequel."
That would be wild.
That
would be wild. Like
that's what I tell myself whenever I go see a horror movie now.
Yeah.
It's secretly a prequel to Cabin.
Well, who has tried to do elements of this is J.J. Abrams with the Cloverfield stuff, right? Like that was the original intent with a lot of that stuff, is people may not know they were Cloverfield movies until you went to the movie and some stuff happened.
But then you just put the title in the name of the title, and you kind of ruined that. Anyway,
that's what I'm saying. They decided not to go that route, but yeah. So anyhow, yes, Unbreakable is my number one. Andrew, talk about your number one. That is also my number 3.
Yeah. Is it any surprise that Unforgiven is going to be my number 1? It's a Clint Eastwood Western. I don't know what else to say. Westerns nowadays, and I don't know if I've said this before, or Westerns throughout time have always gone through the tropes, and they're legion of tropes now, and they're very infamous, Gunslinger comes into town, cleans it up from all the villainy. It's the Yojimbo effect, or Yojimbo effect, sorry. This is probably one of the first times that you saw a true realistic Western. And the fact that they got the most infamous Western guy ever to do it, Clint Eastwood was like, you know what? I've been doing these spaghetti Westerns and these stylized Westerns my entire career. What if I went and I made a true, authentic, real experience Western? And it's insane. You see, it's crazy because I just watched this the other week, just to rewatch it. And it's crazy seeing how much Clint Eastwood's character is trying to forget who he was and who he, used to be, and that his wife, fixed him, and that's the entire driving force of the movie. But then there's that one line at the very end, like, what'd they do to Ned? And then you see him and he doesn't say anything. It's the perfect time for a classic Western one-liner, like, well, let's go get him or something. He just walks over to the horse, picks up the bottle of whiskey, takes a swig, and you're like, oh no, everything is undone. And it's such an amazing movie. If it wasn't for the good, the bad, and the ugly just being primo, everything you would want in a classic cliche Western, this would be the best Western of all time. And if people say Unforgiven is the best Western of all time, I would go, yeah, I get it. It's unlike anything.
It's definitely like one of the perfect culminations of the genre in a way that like deconstructs what came before and improves on it and kind of cashes in on all of the credibility of its action stars. In a way that's really, really satisfying. This just missed my top 5. I probably owe it a rewatch. When I reviewed it 6 years ago, I said it was really unflinching and powerful, and totally agree with everything you said.
Gene Hackman's amazing in it too.
Gene Hackman is amazing in everything.
That's true too.
Yeah. I don't really have much to add. You covered it all. It is
one of only 3 Westerns to win Best Picture. Kind of cool.
There you go.
Fun fact.
All right. So tell us about your number 1, John.
United 93. I only watched it the once after it came out. I have a bit of a weird, morbid soft spot for 9/11 movies. Every 9/11, I'll usually watch 1 or 2 as a way to get myself back into that headspace and commemorate what best I can and kind of make sense of my jumbled up traumatic memories of that Tuesday morning. And this, I think, of the 30 or so 9/11 pictures and documentaries I've watched, is the most effective. It's the most powerful.
Yes.
There's something visceral about like the real time untelling of like these people on that plane finding out as they're happening, like, oh, we're being hijacked, and oh, all the other planes that got hijacked are in the ground right now. Maybe we can do something about this. And that sort of camaraderie, that coming together, that it sort of embodies and emboldens the American spirit in a way I don't think any other picture has done as effectively, because this is real. These were real people that literally sacrificed their lives to help.
Yeah.
Whatever, they didn't even know what they were helping. They didn't know they were on their way to the Capitol or the White House. They were just like, we have to do this because there's no other solution. And it's shot really well. This was what, Greengrass, right? Paul Greengrass, same guy that did the Bourne movies. And I don't love his like chaotic handy cam style, but it works for this because it's a chaotic story that just doesn't stop. Another one I probably owe a rewatch to, but especially like the last 10 minutes are just like they're as difficult to watch as they are just like nail biting. It's so good.
As soon as people, I'm getting emotional thinking about
I know,
it. Right now,
I sobbed through the entire thing. Yeah.
And it's like, if this was fiction, it would be an incredible film, but it's not. It really did happen, probably very close to this dramatization, because we're just taking a couple guesses. But because it's real, it makes it so much more impactful.
Yeah, and it's a movie we know how it's going to end, but there's an intimacy to it that prevails through the entire thing that keeps it like a scene I always come back to that kills me every single time is at the very end, whenever people start calling their loved ones, you know, and it's like, okay, this is we only, as you know, I guess you could say the witnesses or those that have seen the ramifications of a post 9/11 world, you know, we know the broad strokes of, you know, what happened that day, you know, Tower 1, Tower 2, the Pentagon and stuff like that. Seeing the intimate moments of the people who this affected and who this happened to is so, there's really not many words for it. It's something that I know I should have seen, and I'm glad I have seen, but it kills you every single time you have to watch it. It's powerful movie.
Yeah, in the chat, Jay Bourgeois mentions, you know, how amazing it is that it came out within 5 years of the actual event, which is, you know, usually you would think too soon. In fact, I think there was one. I think World Trade Center also came out around that same time, and that movie did feel too soon. It felt like, you know, you kind of missed some things here, but somehow
it also wasn't good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the Nicolas Cage one, right?
Yeah, and I just watched that this previous 9/11 on the 20th anniversary. And it aged the worst, I think, of a lot of the dramatized narrative movies I've watched. I was going to recommend real quickly. There's a documentary. I want to say "Voices from Inside the Tower," which is a collection of voicemails and phone calls from people who perished.
I couldn't do that.
And it's real recordings of people that really were usually above the impact zone calling their loved ones, and it's like a 90-minute. History Channel doc where they just like interview the people that received the voicemails, the loved ones that have lost their son, their kid, their husband. And yeah, that's rough. That's a rough watch, but it's that this United 93 tapped into a lot of that sort of zeitgeist, like that feeling of like the inevitable, this is going to happen from moment one, everyone in this movie is going to die. And it's like, you got to just sit with that for the next 90 minutes and watch it unfold.
And to use some of the real people in the, you know, tower control and like those kind of things in the movie was also a really inspired choice, and I think very honoring of their work. So,
I don't know how Paul Greengrass did it. The fact that if you look at movies like Nick Cage's World Trade Center, it felt like Hollywood was trying to make a buck off of the tragedy, whereas United 93 felt like it was paying tribute. And I don't know what that difference is. Like, he just made it more personal, and maybe it felt low budgetish, and it just seemed like it wasn't made, you know, to make money. It was made.
I think the intimate focus helped. It was just like, let's just focus on this flight and specifically these like 5 or 6 people. Whereas World Trade Center was like, let's talk about the one firefighter who got pulled from the rubble the least, the longest from the collapse. And it was like, Nick Cage's character in that movie, not to discount what he did, because he was obviously a hero, he doesn't help anybody. He goes in last, the thing collapses on him, and he gets pulled out last. Like it's not like a great story that shows a good cross section of like what happened. It was just they're in like the concourse, they're in the shopping mall underneath. Like they didn't see a lot of this stuff first happen. And indeed, his entire perspective is like, what happened? I thought the elevator shaft collapsed. Like, no, both buildings came down. You missed the entire day. Whereas United 93 had more of a perspective, I thought, that was, I think, more useful and powerful, because their decision is born out of the fact they know what's already happened.
Yeah.
Whereas, World Trade Center sort of like, let's just follow this guy who's generally ignorant to what's going on, and he just needs to be saved. And it's a nice portrait of like the firefighters and what they did in the recovery, but not one of my favorite 9/11 films.
Yeah, Paul Greengrass and Peter Berg, both of those guys know how to make a respectable, like a in memoriam film.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That is United 93 was John's number 1, my number 2, and Andrew's number 4.
4, yeah.
I'm glad we all picked it. I wasn't sure if you guys had even seen it, or if people even liked it, because it's been so long since it came out.
It's just so hard to watch.
It's very good.
Yeah, I love it. I got one honorable mention because you guys mentioned the others. Unleashed. It's a Jet Li movie. I don't know if you guys have seen this one or not.
Okay.
You had me at Jet.
Okay, so basically the premise of this is Bob Hoskins found this little Chinese child, and he raised him to be an attack dog, and he has a collar on him, and Bob Hoskins' character is like a big underworld criminal, like a Al Capone sort of thing in London, and he brings Jet Li with him everywhere he goes, and he's on a leash. And all he has to do is take off the leash, and then he just goes into attack mode. And he puts the leash back on him, and he's docile again.
That's very interesting.
It sounds like it would be like a really crazy action movie. And don't get me wrong, there are crazy action sequences in it. But Jet Li comes across Morgan Freeman and somebody else, I forget her name. But then the movie turns into a rehabilitation / trying to humanize this character. So the movie has several names. Yes, as Phil says, it's a Jet Li movie with Mario.
And it was done by Louis Leterrier, who was the same guy that did the Transporter films.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. It has another name, Danny the Dog, but I think Unleashed is the
terrible name. Oh, God. I'm glad they changed it. That's terrible.
Yeah, Danny the Dog. Unleashed. It's a surprisingly good movie with an actual good story to tell.
Nice.
Aaron, what did you have on your honorable mentions?
Dodgeball, a true underdog story.
Oh, I guess that counts.
Yeah, it does. Underdog.
I thought the very first word had to be
No, that's just any word in the title.
If we're going, but on Dodgeball would have probably been my number 1.
Really? Over United 93.
It's
United 93, Dodgeball.
I think at that moment it comes down to rewatchability.
Right. And I just rewatched Dodgeball just a few weeks ago, and the whole movie is filled with good quotable lines, and it's legitimately hilarious. Cram it up your cram hole. I still get mileage out of that.
Yeah. Also, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I think is pretty good.
Man, I would have to go through my entire list now and just find letters.
Yeah, I just sort of alphabetical and went to UN.
And then the other one does actually UN is the first word, but that's Under the Skin, the Scarlett Johansson as the man eater.
The movie's too weird.
It is weird. It is a very weird movie. Did you have any others, Jonathan?
One you had recommended to me, Untold: Malice at the Palace, that documentary about the basketball fight. That was pretty good.
Oh, that's so good.
And another one that's worth shouting out, because I think I had so low expectations, that Unfriended really exceeded them. That was the movie. That was the horror movie shot entirely through the perspective of like screen sharing and video calls. And that was like one of the first. This was like 8-9 years ago. It was one of the first movies to really do that gimmick of a movie told entirely through screens. Yeah. And it's not great, but I thought it would be terrible. So I do like that one. And the rest, you guys have already mentioned: Unforgiven, Unbreakable, The Untouchables, all right there as well.
Nice. Well, let's finish up with some buried treasure, guys. What's that one thing in any area of pop culture that you want people to know about? John, you're our guest, so you will go last. Andrew, why don't you kick us off?
It's a movie that I was always really high on, and just rewatched it the other day. And every time I watch it, it somehow gets better and better. Bad Times at the El Royale.
Yes.
I mean, I love this movie whenever it came out, which was like 2017, 16, somewhere around there.
Don't tell me that. No, this movie came out a year ago. Don't tell me it's 5 years old already.
Yeah. I loved this movie whenever it came out. Watching it again, because I bought it. It was there had a deal on Apple, and I'm like, "Ooh, well, I'm gonna buy it." It was like $5, and I rewatched it. And whenever I was watching it, I'm like, "How is this not nominated for Best Picture?" It was one of the most captivating, most unique stories of that year. It was shot phenomenally. Everybody's amazing in it. It's a crazy, insane, as close to Quentin Tarantino as you can get without being Tarantino. It's such a good movie.
I recently, most people know this, my day job is writing for a channel called CinemaSins, where we, jokingly catalog mistakes, quote unquote, from movies. And I was assigned this movie. And when you do something like that, you watch every scene intently. What's going on in the background? What's happening here? What's, it has the continuity or whatever. This movie got 10 times better watching it like that. Like, this is the kind of movie that rewards close watching, because the way it does themes, and there are so many moments, and they're so subtle and beautiful, that are about decisions, about, right side, left side, wrong or right, flipping a coin. Like, this movie presents them visually, thematically. It's astonishing. There's a character who dies in this movie, and I won't, spoil by saying which one, but there's a character that died. Well, there's several characters that died in this movie, but
there's more than one.
But one of these characters' deaths is literally on the line dividing this hotel. This hotel that they're at has a dividing line between California and Nevada, right?
Yeah.
And is dying on this line with a person on each side of them, kind of representing two different things in his life. I mean, just stuff like that is throughout this movie, where you just look at it and go, how much brilliant thought was put into this movie. I'm glad you're bringing it up. I will talk about Bad Times at the El Royale
anytime you want,
because it is one of my favorites, and it just keeps climbing my list.
Well, it's from a guy who's only technically directed 2 movies, because he's mainly writer. It's Drew Goddard.
Yeah, Drew Goddard. Yeah. He's an incredible writer.
He directed a couple episodes of The Good Place. That was his brainchild.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, whenever I see this movie or A Cabin in the Woods, which we talked about earlier, it makes you think he has such a visual eye that I would love to see him direct more things.
Oh yeah. He's incredible. Both the movies he's done have been incredible. So yeah.
So yeah, if you haven't seen Bad Times, I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah. I have a new sitcom, a network sitcom that I have picked up.
They still make those?
This is Abbott Elementary. Abbott Elementary is on ABC. You can also find it on Hulu if you have Hulu. And it is basically The Office meets Boston Public. It is The Office meets inner city school.
Nobody
school.
remembers Boston Public, but I loved that show when it originally
I did
ran.
too. I loved all those Boston. What was the law one that
Boston Legal with Will Shatner?
Boston Legal, and all that stuff was fun. But this is a ton of fun. I'm really enjoying it. Everybody's great in this. The mockumentary gimmick still for me works. I like what it allows the characters to do, as far as kind of telling their own story and those kind of things, reactions to the camera. I think that's a fun little play, and it works here, and I'm really enjoying it. So Abbott Elementary, I know we don't often talk about network television.
No, almost never.
And I don't actually have access to it on network television. I just watch it on Hulu and enjoy it quite a bit. So Abbott Elementary is a lot of fun. John, what about you? What's your buried treasure?
I'm going to go back 50 years for this one. I trolled through all my recent rewatches and watches to find a movie that maybe you guys haven't heard of, and I'm confident neither of you have seen 1973's The Last of Sheila from Herbert Ross. This is a murder mystery, sort of celebrity-filled picture. We got James Coburn and James Mason and Raquel Welch and a very young Ian McShane in the middle of the picture there. Great cast. And if you like Agatha Christie, if you like Clue, if you like something like A Death on the Nile, this is like, will scratch that itch in a good way. 6 people come on board this guy's yacht, and he has a fun little game to play with his 6 friends. He assigns them each a secret identity, and they have to figure out what each other's identity is before the end of the week. And the sort of the twist is not the twist of the movie, but the twist they find out is that each of their secret identities is a real identity and a real secret someone else in the group has. So as they play the game, they're like, wait a minute, we're actually getting to some like really difficult stuff here between us. And then, of course, some people get murdered, and it's a kind of a cat and mouse unraveling in real time over the 2-hour picture, and really fun. And I think it's the kind of picture that keeps you guessing. Lots of like long monologues where people explain everything they think they know, and then they get it wrong. It reminded me of a couple good Hitchcock thrillers, and certainly like any of like the monologuing of Hero or whoever Danny Craig played in Knives Out. Definitely reminded me of those pictures.
Yeah, Benoit Blanc.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I was just thinking,
Are
like,
you talking Kentucky Fried Sherlock? Is that what they call him? Or something?
yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, The Last of Sheila from 1973. Really good murder mystery movie.
Murder mysteries, man. They're
looking
back.
at the pictures of this, and I think I've seen this movie. It may have been on IFC one day, and it may have just been in the background. But I'm looking at the pictures, and I'm like, yeah, I know those scenes. Like I'm looking at the James Mason character
I
with
love James Mason. There's something about him. He's such a charming, easygoing. I could listen to his voice narrate anything. It's terrific.
I
could
have
be
not
wrong.
seen it. It definitely sounds. I love that concept. Very interesting concept.
It's a neat concept. He's like, hey guys, let's all get together, and for a whole week,
Sheila's the name of the boat
I
or
want
something.
you, and I want you to play this game, and I've given you each an identity, and they think it's just a game. Like, oh, you're a baker, you're a singer.
That is,
no,
man.
no.
That is right.
You're a murderer. You're a closeted homosexual. You're a shoplifter, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. These actually prescribe to real people in the group, but the other 5 don't know it.
That is ripe for a remake. That's just a really fun concept, and a lot of people, I'm sure, haven't heard of it. So there you go. The Last of Sheila, which is available to rent or buy on digital platforms. Abbott Elementary is on Hulu and ABC. And Bad Times at the El Royale, also available to rent or buy on all digital platforms. Well, we did it, guys. We managed to do a podcast. We charted the course and made it happen. So well done. Thanks for joining us today.
Please stop recording.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Sif Pop is part of the Studio DNA Podcast Network. Find out more about other shows on the network at studiodna.media or by searching Studio DNA in your podcast player. Huge thanks to Andrew for hanging out again today.
Well, thank you, buddy.
Big thanks to producer Phil for producing the audio and video show.
Thanks, Phil.
And thank you to John Paula for joining us today as our guest guru. John, where would you like to send people? Where can they find you?
You might as well go check out my letterbox. I'm a couple weeks behind, but I did just review the newest Peacock film, Marry Me, with Jennifer Lopez and Owen Wilson. I didn't think very highly of it, but if you'd like to read my 500-word review, you can find it letterbox.com/John Paula.
There you go. Well, we appreciate you being here.
Of course.
And
Pleasure,
look forward to seeing you again. Much love and gratitude to our Sif Pop members for giving monthly to make Sif Pop a real thing. Support starts at $3 a month. You get access to bonus episodes at certain levels and fun perks. You can check it all out at patreon.com/SifPop. Lots of ways to connect with us. You can leave a comment, a rating, or a review at Apple Podcasts, or you can email us, feedback@sifpop.com. And finally, if you're having a good time, your movie-loving friends will probably like the show too, so make sure you let them know about it and that listening is much easier than pretending you have zero privacy and are under constant surveillance, whether you like it or not. We will be back next week, I think, with Cyrano finally coming out in theaters next week. We'll talk a little about Cyrano and maybe do a review of The Music Man on Broadway, since I'll have seen that by then. But we will see you then. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys, for hanging out.
welcome.
Jay Bourgeois and Mark, Buck Reviewer, Lolly, I see you in there as well. Doc, saying hello at the beginning. I appreciate you guys, and we will catch you on the next live show, which I think should be Saturday. I'll be back in town Friday, so I think we'll be able to do a Saturday show next week. And I think Ian's going to be on since he's going to be in town. He'll be on next week, I think is the plan. So, bye, live chat.
Bye.